In the summer of 2003, while coalition forces moved through southern Iraq and the world's attention was on the war, a team of German archaeologists working under a separate mission to protect culture made a discovery outside the city of Nasiriyah that was not reported in any major publication for 11 years. They had been digging at a site identified in the 1990s through satellite images as a likely royal burial complex next to the ancient walls of Uruk, the city of Gilgamesh. The excavation had stopped during the invasion and started again under difficult conditions in the summer. Working quickly, knowing that the political situation could shut them down at any moment, at a depth of about 8 meters below the current surface, beneath 3 clear archaeological layers from different times of occupation, they found a sealed stone chamber. The chamber was untouched. The ceiling material along the doorframe was unbroken. Whatever was inside had not been touched since the door was closed. The lead archaeologist on the dig was Dr. Yorg Fasbinder of the Bavarian State Office for the Preservation of Historical Monuments. Fasbinder had been part of the team that carried out the original satellite survey of Uruk in the 1990s. It was the same survey that had identified canal systems, garden structures, and city layouts matching the descriptions in the Epic of Gilgamesh with such precision that the German press briefly called it the discovery of Gilgamesh's city. When the sealed chamber was opened in July 2003, Fasbinder's team recorded what they found with photographs and written field notes before anything was removed. The documentation exists. It is kept in the archive of the Bavarian State Office. It has never been formally published as an excavation report. The chamber contained burial goods, standard items for a royal Mesopotamian burial from the right period. Clay vessels, carved stone objects, remains of organic materials that had long since decayed, ceremonial weapons, and 3 objects that are not standard, that do not fit, that have no explanation in any known technological timeline of the ancient world. The first object was a cylindrical metal container, about 40 centimeters long and 8 centimeters wide. Not clay, not stone, not wood, metal. More specifically, it was an alloy that the first field assessment identified as containing parts not consistent with Bronze Age metallurgy. The container was sealed at both ends with a material that seemed to be a kind of glass, not the rough soda lime glass that appears in ancient Egyptian contexts around 1500 BCE, but a clear, optically consistent glass of a quality that Western manufacturing did not achieve until the 17th century CE. Inside the container, visible through the glass end caps, was a rolled material. Not a clay tablet, not papyrus, not any organic writing material consistent with the period, but a thin, flexible metallic sheet with markings on its surface. The second object was a carved stone disc, about 30 centimeters across and 4 centimeters thick. The stone itself, tentatively identified in the field as a form of obsidian, was not the issue. The issue was the precision of the markings on its surface. The disc was divided into sections by lines of perfect regularity, a regularity that microscopic examination later confirmed could not have been made with any known Bronze Age or earlier tool. The lines were laser precise. That is not a metaphor. When the disc was examined by a material scientist at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich in 2009, the cut lines were measured at a consistent depth of 0.3 millimeters with a tolerance difference of less than 0.01 millimeters across the entire surface. The tools that could make that kind of consistency did not exist in any known civilization until the 20th century. The markings on the disc were not decorative. They were mathematical. A German mathematician who studied the disc as part of the 2009 analysis identified the arrangement of the markings as a computational system, a base, 60 mathematical notation of extraordinary complexity, far beyond the standard Sumerian sexagesimal system that modern scholars already consider remarkably advanced. The notation on the disk describes relationships between astronomical bodies with a precision that requires knowledge of orbital mechanics that Western science did not formally describe until Kepler in the 17th century CE. The third object is the one that has brought the most careful, deliberate silence. It was a small rectangular block about the size of a modern paperback book made of a material that the field team could not identify at first. Not stone, not metal, not any organic material, but a synthetic composite. When a sample was analyzed at the Munich laboratory in 2009, the material was identified as containing polymer compounds, specifically long-chain molecular structures that do not occur naturally and that human chemistry did not learn to produce until the 20th century. A polymer composite in a sealed burial chamber beneath 8 meters of layered archaeological deposit in a layer dated by multiple independent methods to about 2600 BCE. That is the date most historians connect with the historical Gilgamesh, if a historical Gilgamesh existed. The Sumerian king list places Gilgamesh as the 5th king of the first dynasty of Uruk, ruling for 126 years, a figure that scholars usually reduce to a more normal reign length when they accept him as historical at all. He is described in the king list as 2/3 divine. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest literary work in the world, describes him as a man who sought immortality, who traveled to the ends of the earth, who spoke with the survivor of a great flood, and who was told that the thing he was looking for, the secret of eternal life, was beyond the reach of any human. The epic ends with Gilgamesh returning to Uruk without the secret. He returns to his city. He dies. And somewhere beneath that city, if the 2003 excavation documentation is accurate, he was buried with objects that should not have existed in 2600 BCE, or in any period before the 20th century. The materials analysis from the Munich laboratory was completed in stages between 2009 and 2011. The full report is 47 pages long. It has not been published. A summary was shared privately among a small number of European archaeologists and material scientists in 2012. One of the people who received that summary was Dr. Elelanina Robson at University College London, one of the world's leading experts on ancient Mesopotamian mathematics and one of the scholars whose work on Sumerian astronomical texts is considered definitive. Robson has not commented publicly on the objects. She published a paper in 2013 on Babylonian mathematical astronomy that includes, in a footnote, a reference to unusual mathematical notation found in an undisclosed Uruk context that creates problems for current models of ancient mathematical development. One footnote: the cylindrical metal container and its contents, the metallic sheet with markings, were sent to a specialist in ancient writing systems at the Free University of Berlin in 2011. The specialist, whose name does not appear in the limited documentation that has circulated, reportedly spent 8 months working with the sheet before producing a preliminary analysis. The analysis concluded that the markings on the metallic sheet were not a known ancient script. They were not an unknown ancient script either, meaning they did not show the features of an organically developed writing system, the kind that grows more complex over time, adds characters, drops characters, and adapts to new uses. The markings showed the features of an engineered notation, a system designed from the start with internal consistency, full coverage of the ideas it represents, and no evolutionary development, a designed language not discovered over generations, but built. The specialist's preliminary analysis was never followed by a formal publication. In 2013, the objects were moved from the temporary storage facility in Baghdad, where they had been kept since 2003, to a place that the Bavarian State Office documentation describes only as a secure research facility in Europe. That description has not been explained further. In 2014, 11 years after the excavation, a brief reference to the Uruk burial complex appeared in a German-language archaeology journal, a single paragraph in a survey article about Iraqi cultural preservation efforts, noting that a sealed chamber had been discovered next to the ancient walls of Uruk in 2003, and that analysis of the chamber's contents was ongoing. That word appeared in print in 2014. The excavation had taken place in 2003. No update has been published since. Now, let's talk about what the Epic of Gilgamesh actually describes, because the usual reading of that text has hidden something that becomes much more interesting in the context of these objects. The epic describes Gilgamesh's journey to find Utnapishtim, the Sumerian Noah, the man who survived the flood and was granted immortality by the gods. The journey takes Gilgamesh through places that mainstream scholarship treats as mythical: the mountains of Mashu, guarded by scorpion people, the tunnel through which the sun passes at night, the waters of death. But the epic also describes Gilgamesh as having, before the journey begins, objects and knowledge that his companions do not have. The text uses specific language that translators have rendered in different ways as divine tools, the implements of Anu, or sacred instruments. The specific Sumerian terms are complex compounds that earlier translators tended to interpret as weapons or ritual objects. But when those compound terms are examined in the context of the full Sumerian technical vocabulary, rather than just the literary vocabulary, they contain elements that refer to precision, measurement, recording, and transmission, not weapons. Instruments for measuring, recording, and transmitting information. The epic describes Gilgamesh consulting these instruments at specific points in his journey before making decisions, after encountering new terrain, and when calculating the distance left to his destination. The consultation is described in language that matches the language used in Sumerian administrative texts for consulting technical records. Not prayer, not ritual consultation. After the journey, when Gilgamesh returns to Uruk without the secret of immortality, the epic describes him taking specific actions with these instruments. He seals them. The epic uses the Sumerian verb that means to place in permanent containment, the same verb used in administrative texts when records are being archived for long-term preservation rather than active use. He seals the instruments and places them in a location the text describes as beneath the foundations of the Great Wall of Uruk, beneath the foundations. The 2003 excavation site was located next to the ancient walls of Uruk at a depth of 8 meters beneath 3 layers of later occupation. The match between the epic's description and the excavation's location is either exactly what it appears to be or the most important archaeological coincidence in recorded history. The stone disk, with its laser-precise markings and its base 60 astronomical notation describing orbital mechanics. The metallic sheet in the sealed cylindrical container with its engineered notation system that is an instrument for recording and transmitting information. The polymer composite block, whose function is not yet known from the available information, is an instrument of some kind. 3 instruments, sealed, placed beneath the foundations, by a king who had traveled to the ends of the earth looking for something, who had been told he could not have it, and who returned to his city and sealed what he carried and placed it where he believed it would last. The question that the 2003 excavation forces is not whether Gilgamesh was real. The question is where the objects came from. There are 3 possible answers, and none of them are comfortable. The first answer is that the objects were made by a human civilization whose technological ability has been completely erased from the archaeological record, a civilization that achieved polymer chemistry, optical glass manufacturing, and precision machining thousands of years before any known culture shows any early development toward those abilities. The second answer is that the objects were not made on Earth. The third answer is that the dating is wrong, that the objects entered the burial context at a later date than the surrounding material, that the layering is misleading, that the sealed chamber's apparent age does not reflect the true age of its contents. The Munich laboratory addressed this third possibility directly. The sealing material on the chamber door was sampled and dated separately from the chamber contents. The dating was consistent with about 2600 BCE. The sealing material was intact and unbroken when the chamber was opened in 2003. Nothing entered that chamber after it was sealed. Whatever is inside, it was placed there at the time of sealing, at about 2600 BCE. The polymer composite block, the precision-made stone disc, and the sealed cylindrical container with its inscribed metallic sheet were in the ground in a sealed chamber beneath the city of Gilgamesh 4,600 years ago. The Munich analysis exists. The field documentation exists. The objects exist in a secure research facility in Europe whose location has not been publicly identified. Fasbinder has not published a full excavation report. The objects have not been exhibited. The materials analysis has not been released. 11 years after the excavation, a single paragraph appeared in a German-language journal saying that analysis was ongoing. That paragraph was published in 2014. It is now 2025. The analysis has been ongoing for 22 years. The Epic of Gilgamesh ends with its hero standing on the walls of Uruk. The text tells the reader to look at the walls, to examine how they were built, to recognize the skill and the permanence of what Gilgamesh built. Scholars have interpreted this ending as a meditation on mortality, the idea that what a person builds lasts longer than they do, that legacy is the only immortality available to humans. But the epic's final lines do something else that the usual reading tends to skip over. They instruct the reader to find a Lapis Lazuli tablet inside a copper box set into the foundation of the wall, a tablet inside a container set into the foundation with instructions to read it. The epic was written as a set of instructions to find something. The copper box in the foundation is mentioned in the first tablet of the epic and again in the last. It is the frame of the entire story. Everything in between, the friendship with Enkidu, the killing of Hanaba, the rejection of Ishtar, the search for immortality, is the content of what the tablet inside the copper box contains. Gilgamesh wrote his own story down, sealed it, put it in the foundation of the wall, and told everyone who would ever read his story that it was there. The 2003 excavation was next to the walls of Uruk. The sealed chamber was beneath the foundations. What was inside should not exist in any known time period.